We're looking at basic civilizational values in which the Indian civilization is rooted, which have, so to say, led it to its efflorescence and its completeness and greatness, followed by a downfall, to which we would ask a simple question: why, if it was so great, could it fall? And here we find a solution in the tradition itself, that every time in the evolutionary process you reach a degree of perfection or harmony, initially that's the best you can reach. It is always a partial harmony, a partial perfection. The divine being infinite potential, whatever you have reached is insufficient in the long term. Therefore, the necessity for this to open out to its own greater completeness. Therefore, the necessity for this to find its own fullness in a greater realization, in a greater perfection. How will that happen? Let's take, for example, you formed a team which is now perfect in harmony. We're fully aligned in our ideas. We are a startup. We're totally dedicated to this goal. We grow rapidly. We attain to some degree of perfection. Now everybody is interested in investing, and you have to now widen and expand. The first problem you face is the same values which drove you to this success are insufficient for the expansion, or even are contradictory to the expansion, which requires stability, processes, organization, decentralization, which you can't do if you remain in the startup mode. What happens then? Your startup culture has to break down, reform around a larger ideal, integrating something more complete. Otherwise, it will collapse. Or if the larger organization, you're absorbed in a larger institution, their multi-structured hierarchical organization will swamp you and crush your creativity. Your startup will be a waste of time. You can't be creative. You're stuck in a narrow groove. They decide for you. Right? Very simple. The same happens with civilizations. You reach a peak of a certain development and achievement. When you have to move farther, something has to break. I give the analogy of the let's say your team, 5 team members. If one of you now tries to grow more rapidly than the other in your thinking, in your dynamism, in your pace of activity, the other 4 can't keep up with your pace. It creates a disharmony. They have to pull you down, stay with our pace, otherwise we lose the harmony. So any partial harmony is inherently unstable. If one part grows, the other has to pull it back and suffocate his growth, or eventually they break up because now you're going too far in different directions. So the same happens with civilizations. You reach a certain greatness and achievement of the truth that you were able to reach at that point. You need as if for it to break down and deepen to a wider, deeper truth and grow again, rebuilding in a more embracing stature of realization. This is the basis of the 4 yugas. The Satya Yuga is one where you live spontaneously in a spontaneously felt truth. Give the example, the analogy is of the New Year resolution that you create. This year, from today, I will get up early, I will do my exercises, I will eat healthy. It's obvious, so it's so living that you can't help it, you just do it. Full of enthusiasm. 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And then you feel a gap. Where is the gap? Observe carefully. The truth felt, which is still there, strong, and then the parts which have to execute the truth. My body is sleepy. Last night I slept late. I watched TV too long. I'm lethargic. I can't get up and do my exercise. I have to drag it. And what happens next is the part in you which is aligned to the truth imposes itself on the part which is not aligned to the truth. Drags it by willpower. So the first stage where the truth is spontaneous, effortless, in the collectivity of a civilization is the golden age, the Satya Yuga. The second stage where now the truth and the implementation of the truth has a gap. You impose by willpower. You remember the truth. Oh, I have to live up to this ideal. I force myself. That is the Treta Yuga, second stage. Still the truth is lived, but with struggle. What happens now? The gap grows. Because the part which is executing is not living the truth. The gap now grows. And at that stage, your willpower is insufficient. What do? You organize and systematize to enforce the truth. You create religions, you create rituals, you create governance systems. Notice what is governance about finally. Why do you even want a government? Because we can't share spontaneously with a deeper truth. Because some of us get overwhelmed with anger or hatred or jealousy or whatever and break somebody else's freedom, interfere with someone else, steal from or otherwise commit what we call crimes. We break the law. What is this law? What is this constitution? What we agreed to as a commonly held truth or belief. And now if someone breaks that, then we create a punishment system, imposition of punishment, etc. To ensure that they will not break out of the truth by mechanism of external machinery. So by fear of going to jail, I will not steal from you. But in the Satya Yuga, in the Golden Age, I will not steal because it's the most stupid thing I would do. Why would I want to steal when you are my own family, you are myself in another body? So simple. In the second stage, I will not steal, although I am tempted because it's the right thing to do. And I am a generous, truly heroic person. I will never do wrong. Easy. By willpower. Third stage, I'm fearful of the consequences of suffering. So institutions are built. The problem now with the third stage, the Dwapar Yuga, is the institutions overwhelm the freedom of the individual. And at some point, it becomes so suffocating that the individual now breaks rules simply because it needs to be free. You see little children, you pen them up too long in the school, eventually they will break, run out, shout and scream in the hallway. It's a relief to run. So that impulse grows until it breaks the systems. And now everybody spontaneously refuses to follow the law. What happens? The law is meaningless. Very often I've thought, why don't children do this? In school, teacher says, keep quiet. If everybody in the class said, no, we will not, what would teacher do? She would walk out crying. Helpless, you can do nothing. But this is what happens when there is a collective decline in civilizational values. We don't live by it anymore. Now we assume the other person will lie to you. So our contracts change. Where earlier agreement was we agree to do this. Now we say, if you do this, then this will be the consequence. If you do that, then you will pay me this much. All the possibilities of misuse have to be protected against. You see that? And then eventually even that does not work. There's a complete breakdown, chaos. That is your Kali Yuga. But Sri Aurobindo points out Kali Yuga is not merely confusion and chaos. It came because the truth was suffocating. I am pretending to be this nice religious fellow who's living by whatever the holy book tells me to do, but I don't feel it. I don't live it. And when you break away, what are you doing? You're trying to find yourself. What do I really want? I'm fed up with this falsehood. It's actually a quest for finding yourself, a deeper truth. So the passage of Kali, however difficult and chaotic in appearance, is a quest for something deeper. And the first attempt in the deeper quest is, I need to satisfy what? My immediate need, which is generally physical. My immediate comforts, my immediate sensory desires, etc. Having satisfied that, now what? It's not enough. I'm not satisfied. I go deeper and I have a vital satisfaction. My desire to dominate, to control, to possess, to master, to create, to be famous, whatever form it takes. The vital satisfaction. Having got that, still not enough. Now I need to go into some kind of a deeper mental satisfaction of my creativity, my idealism. Living by some ideal gives me greater satisfaction than just dominating over others. Like the barbarian is happy to just bludgeon his way through and feels important. This guy says, no, the ideal is what I live for. And it doesn't matter if it's known or not. See, the mental satisfaction. You can see here it's already approaching something spiritual. That also fails at some point. Moralistic, ethical ideals are great, but up to a point after which I'm not satisfied. There's an emptiness within me. That's when you seek the source deeper within you which would fill that emptiness. And that's your first contact with the spiritual experience. So in the Kali, you go through these stages, which builds and prepares for the spiritual age. And we're talking now no more of individuals, but a collective stage. In the collective, there is this deeper quest and the finding of something that initiates the next spiritual age and therefore the new Satya Yuga. Isn't it? It's obvious. This is the rationale of the four yugas. They are not mathematical, mechanical processes. They don't happen because the planet moved into position, so now I'm starting to think. They happen because there is an inherent psychological law by which this tendency happens, and this is universal. Across all civilizations, across the earth, across the whole universe, it will be the same. Wherever there's conscious living life, you'll follow the four stages. But in this last part is the greatest danger. When you begin to look for a deeper satisfaction, you have gone beyond the physical, vital, and mental satisfactions, and you go deeper. There is a subjectivism. You can lose yourself in that. This Sri Aurobindo warns against. In fact, this is the stage we have entered already as a humanity, a subjective age. This began with, let's say, the end of the First World War, where it was most obvious. Suddenly, everything is pointless, meaningless, not working. What do I seek really? And with that comes a whole sudden interest in partial interior stages. Or you stop with some partial experience and realization and say, this is it, I'm happy with this. Or this is my last, this is spiritual. And the danger of this subjectivism is it can identify with some deeper part of the egoism or a subjective portion within which is deceptive, not real, truly you, but not the divine. And with that, you organize life around it, and it will lead to an even more dangerous and greater chaos than we saw in Kali. Because now each person feels justified by their subjectivism. I feel this, but the other says, but I feel that, and now it is more extreme because it's no more rational. Whereas in the rational age, at least we struggled on the basis of logic, which could be objectivized. Now everyone has abandoned the logic and the rational age. So the subjective age is what today we call postmodernism, where you follow whatever impulse comes within you. And even your new age spirituality teaches you, follow your heart, follow your moment's bliss or desire. They call it bliss, it's not bliss, it's just impulse of desire, satisfaction of some kind. But all the key words of the spiritual life are taken, warped and projected as a spiritual teaching and a spiritual satisfaction by following those keywords or those impulsiveness. Extremely dangerous. This is what is projected today in the form of spirituality. Just during the break, one of our participants asked me some questions about the spiritual life and about the practice. How does one get to that? But there was also a question about what do you think of X, some teacher, New Age teacher. So I'll read a statement from that X. X says or writes, "This is what enlightenment is all about. A deep understanding that there is no problem." Very attractive. Enlightenment is understand there is no problem. Then, with no problem to solve, what will you do? Immediately you start living. You will eat, you will sleep, you will love, you will work, you will have a chit chat, you will sing, you will dance. What else is there to do? And this is spread by teachers. I got this because some well-known today teacher of spirituality with a large following is pushing this out as an example of true spirituality. The danger is multifold. First, you realize here there is no self, there is no soul, there is no change of consciousness. All you have done is taken a mental stance of saying there is no problem. Actually, there is a problem. There are huge problems. Even this would not be acceptable within the Buddhist framework if you saw, because suffering has not gone away. You just took a mental stance of some kind where you say, yes, now I have no problem, I just live. You justify the inertia of your current lifestyle by ignoring the problem, by ignoring the suffering or the pain, and you call this spiritual. Extremely dangerous. And this is the populist spirituality today, variations on this idea. Another danger, which from the same text I will draw upon, this person starts by saying, this is what enlightenment is all about. What is this word enlightenment? I've had these discussions in some of the interfaith meetings. The Buddhists quote, for the purpose of enlightenment. Buddha was enlightened. I don't know, there's a problem. Buddha was not enlightened. Europe had age of enlightenment some 200 years ago. So all of Europe was enlightened. So they were all Buddha. The problem is this word enlightenment in English is undefined. Buddha does not speak of enlightenment. He speaks of nirvana. Right? Nirvana is not enlightenment. So the framework of, for lack of a better word, I'm using European, the European expansion takes these ideas, takes these words, translates them and repackages them to something which is utterly contrary and says this is the same. So now I'm a teacher of enlightenment. I met someone in New York. He said, I'm enlightened. I said, what do you mean? One day I just woke up and I was enlightened. Oh. Still don't see anything real in him. So then I asked, wow. He says, I am like Raman Maharshi. He was enlightened. I'm enlightened by myself. He had no teacher. I have no teacher. So I'm in the lineage of Raman Maharshi. Wow. You see how the mind is playing games? Then I said, do you know the difference between enlightenment and self-realization? He said, no. What is the difference? What Raman Maharshi taught was self-realization, not enlightenment. Oh, is there a difference? Now, the man has just got that word, identified with some state that he had. He woke up, he had a light of mind of some kind. He felt luminous in his head somehow. And he said, I'm enlightened, and that's Raman Maharshi's self-realization. No difference. And then he teaches. Now he has a whole following. So, there are many such today in the new age. Go back to what they teach. If this is what they teach, it is not spiritual. There's a lot of deception taking place today in the name of spirituality. And why is this possible? Because we have entered the age of subjectivism, where you can say pretty much anything subjectively and pass it off as spiritual. You have to be very clear of what is spiritual. Spiritual is when you enter in relation with the divine or with the self which is divine, with yourself, your soul. If that is the relationship, deepening it is your spirituality. If there is not that relationship, it is not spirituality. It can be any poise of the mind or emotions or any other state. Even induced states with electronics, they create brain waves, influence your brain waves. Oh, I feel wide, I feel large, I lost my sense of separateness. Oh, that was a spiritual experience. No. It was a removal of barriers of your physical consciousness. You experienced oneness with the universe as if it was an extension of your body. It is not a spiritual state. Because you can be in this all you want, you will never have experienced the self even. At best, you can say it's a step that prepares you for a deeper experience of self. Certainly, no problem there. But you can't call it spiritual because nothing has changed in you fundamentally. You'll be the same person doing the same things. The whole problem with this word enlightenment, and that's why all the New Age teachers avoid the word self-realization. They speak of enlightenment. And there they're playing a game. Be careful. So all this is the nature of the subjective age where humanity now stops with an intermediate truth and says, this is it. Sri Aurobindo gives the example of what happened in the Second World War with Germany. It was the first nation that had reached the subjective passage in the whole of on earth and was ready, mature for it, for the subjective passage. So it entered it. And you had most beautiful philosophies, music and arts emerging. Whole of Europe was literally driven by, even today, the greatest musicians, composers, you'll find mostly in the German space. Greatest philosophers, Indophiles also, Germany. Why? Because it had opened to something. But then what happened? It stopped halfway. Instead of going to the soul of the nation, it stopped to the ego of the nation. And the natural conclusion, we are therefore the superior race. Consequence of that, survival of the fittest, the others have to become subjugated as inferior races. And what followed in the ideology of Nazism was a consequence of this. There was no evil in intent. It was just the natural consequence of recognizing you are superior, others are inferior. We have to make them they have to be subjugated to us, or we have to raise them to our superior, which is us. So, the danger of subjectivism, you see. False subjectivism is what Sri Aurobindo points to as the danger, and to go deeper, to touch what is true within you, is the true subjectivism of the soul. Now, this is true of individuals, it's true of communities, it's true of traditions, lineages, or teachings, including in New Age teachings, it's true of civilizations and of the earth. So, we are actually passing through a very precarious passage because of the false subjectivism, but hopefully through this we will break through and touch something which is a truer subjectivism, and that would be the beginning of the spiritual age. There's a very interesting observation Sri Aurobindo makes. I will have to paraphrase, but it goes something like this. In the West, whenever there are great revolutions, it leads to a massive external change in forms, but mostly internally, nothing much changes. You see, in France, you had the French Revolution. So many people were guillotined, the royalty was thrown out, the political class changed, etc. People, meaning the lowest class of people, take over, now begin to rule, etc. The king's palace is made into a museum, all the symbols modified, and so on. They throw out the church, God, and the rest. What happened to the people internally, in consciousness? Not much. That's the nature of the revolution. Then he contrasts it. He says, in the East, and in India in particular, in the East, when there is a revolution, there is an enormous inner change, although externally you may not see too many changes. And I'm going to point to this because I think, to me, this qualifies as a huge shift what has happened in the last 10 years. In the collective consciousness of the Indian people, at least in those who identify with the sense of the deeper traditions of the Indian civilization, who are not bound in some fixed, rigid religious forms. There's been a kind of a relaxation, an opening, a sense of freedom, and even a turn to find something deeper roots. And you find suddenly all over people are interested in learning Sanskrit, they are interested in going deeper into their traditions or learning from texts, whatever form it takes. In the internet, it has enabled a lot of knowledge. A shift has taken place. You can feel it, it's in the air. But externally, you see not much difference. Of course, it has consequences and important consequences. But it's not like anybody was killed for that or a major shift in the political dispensation and all that. So, having described these two differences, Sri Aurobindo says, therefore, well, therefore is important, and you must think about it. Therefore, when once again India becomes the theatre of all the world's major events, it will be the sign of the beginning of a new spiritual age. A very interesting statement. The therefore is important. So suddenly things are happening here which are impacting the world, and the world turns to India in some way, significant way. This you see happening particularly in the last 5 years. When the Ukraine war was happening, you had the Ukraine president approaching the Indian government, you had Russia approaching Indian government, US approaching Indian government. For what? For Ukraine war? To take sides? How does it matter? It does matter. What? And there are of course economic and other we don't go into the technicals of it. But that India had suddenly acquired this prominence in global affairs in a way, having done nothing. What did India do? It had not even started producing new arms that Ukraine or Russia could buy. But the shift in consciousness had shifted the relationship with the world. And things are happening. So signs, and that everyone now turns, if you see, India is still the world's largest, fastest growing economy, despite whatever setbacks due to the lockdown and other things. Something has shifted. That shift is important. It's not even a spiritual awakening, but it's like an earthquake. Something shifts underlying and which is preparing for the real awakening. When that begins to happen, then you will see the form of the spiritual age. We're still away from that, but it's in that direction. And the sense of it is this awakening taking place in people to relate to their own deeper spiritual truth. So I'm going somewhat in depth in this because to point out that there will be many such movements. Many of them are superficial, some of them have a pretense of spirituality, but they stop with the presenting an individual as a teacher who is extremely charismatic of some kind. But what is the teaching? What does it demand from its followers? Notice that. And if it does not demand you to find yourself, you can be sure it's one of those useful as intermediate steps, but not really a spiritual movement, even if it calls it that. So you have to apply your own discrimination. Trust that within you is a deeper sensitivity, which comes with your own consciousness and your soul's influence, which is there. Otherwise, you would not be interested in these things. Be clear about that. There is a sensitivity which yearns for something higher, which recognizes where there's something more deeply satisfying. Trust that to show you what is more true or what is less true. Doesn't mean they're false. it may be less true. But aim for whatever for you is the highest now, for the moment, that is meaningful. And maybe as you approach that, you'll find something still deeper, which will be more meaningful. But trust and let it guide you and lead you. Okay. So this is the picture I'm broadly giving. I've touched upon various aspects of governance also, which need to be reviewed, recast in India. When will that happen? The constitution itself of India is wrong. I'm saying this very bluntly. So no problem if you disagree. At the very least, it will provoke you to think. And I'm going to tell you what Sri Aurobindo had to say about it. Maybe I quote from something. I noted this as a quotation. Sri Aurobindo, this is first a message from the mother, which she gave in 1969 to a group of politicians from Delhi. So this is post-freedom. Socialism, like all political parties, belongs to the past and must be surpassed if we want to serve the truth. Socialism, like all political parties, belongs to the past. Very interesting. Political parties, even as a structure, belongs to the past. So there was one politician who came to the mother and said, "What is the root cause of India's problems?" Now, what do you think would be an answer? What would you the fashionable things to say, oh, poverty, lack of unity, lack of organization, lack of vision, all the usual answers you can have. Mother's answer, very simple. Root of all problems of India, insincerity. Think about it. This is very, very, very important. You have all the wealth potentially. You have all the knowledge, all the resources, all the goodwill also within you. Yet things don't work out. You see corruption at every step. Even a road has to be relaid. It's been done by somewhere, money has gone somewhere and the thing is badly done. With the next train, it breaks down. And again, you have to spend money and again spend money and again spend money. We participate in that also. Insincerity everywhere. All the way through, top to bottom, including us, common people. Insincerity. What is the solution to India's problems? Was his next question. Mother's answer, sincerity. If all of us became true to what we know deeply, aligned our thoughts, actions to that, everything would fall into place. And it doesn't take much to do this much, isn't it? So, political parties and socialism, she says, belongs to the past. To serve the truth, that's your way forward in the future. So this is from 1969, but Sri Aurobindo writes in 1910. It is becoming increasingly clear that India will pass through the experiment of parliamentary democracy simply to realize that it is not suited for us. Wow. What a huge waste of time. To pass through this massive experiment, pure imitation of the British. That's all we did. When India became free, there was this team which was created to build the Indian Constitution. Today, again, politicians play you, they lie to you when they say Ambedkar wrote the Constitution. No, he did not. He was chairman of a committee of 300 people who put together the Constitution by reading patches from constitutions around the world and incorporating pieces that they thought were useful. It was never comprehensively thought out. It was never founded on essential principles. They took the British Constitution as a starting point and patched pieces into it. Dr. Ambedkar himself in Parliament stood with the Constitution printed in his hand and said, I do not consider this worth the paper on which it is printed. This is on record in the Parliament of India. Nobody tells you this. You have statues of Ambedkar all over holding the Constitution, and he's made a symbol for a whole political movement to oppose other interests. What a deception, full of lies and falsehood, insincerity in politics, through and through. He was sincere enough to say, I do not consider it worth. Why? Because it was never a thought-out constitution. Again, it starts with, we the people decide to do. They took a model from British or American. That was not Indian civilization. Indian civilization is rooted in Dharma. What is Dharma is what we fight for, isn't it? So even in the organization of, I'm going to jump a little bit across time zones, but it's the same topic. Going back a few hundred years, even the organization of the king as a ruler was not based on we the people, right? It was not democracy, it was not socialism, it was not communism. Although people will read that, Sri Aurobindo comments on this, I have a long quote about this, where he says people like to read modern ideas into the old text. Yes, there are similarities, but it's not what we do today, which was the democracy then. Certainly there was democracy, there were people selecting, etc. So those essential ideas are there, but it's not the democracy of today. What was the structure? And he gives the whole unfoldment of the stages of the structure, but what it came to finally was the king. And the king does not own the property, he does not own the country, he does not own the people, he cannot be a despot. Unlike what you see in Europe and the Middle East, where basically you are subject to the king. King could decide your head could be chopped off the next day, he could usurp your land, he could do anything, he owned it. You see that when the Islamic invasions came over and the kings of the Islamic lineages were this type. They were despots. Because that was the concept of king. The Indian concept of king was not like that. The people were free. The people had means to intervene, and if the king went mad, they could intervene in various ways. But what was the king's role? His role was to protect Dharma. Dharma was above king. Dharma is the divine truth principle and the way it has to be worked out. What is real, what is true, what is right, what is good. These are the ways you could approach it. Essentially, it would be the truth, the right, the vast, Satyam, Ritam, Brhat. But in action, it's more the Ritam aspect, which is the Dharma, unfolding. So it has two aspects. One is the essential principles, the other is the forms in which we articulate it. Both are Dharma. But the forms change in time, the essential remains true eternally. So this Dharma and its unfoldment, this unfolding part of the Dharma, the Ritam aspect, is what corresponds to in the Chinese tradition as the Tao. Tao is not Dharma. Tao is the Ritam, the unfolding. And this unfolding is what the king is protecting. When he passes judgment, when he takes a decision, it is always in reference to this. And when he doesn't know what to do, there is a conflict of dharmas where inferior dharmas are colliding and you don't know what is superior. He goes to the sage, the rishi, and takes his advice. What is the right thing in such a situation? You understand? These were the keepers of the Dharma in the knowledge, in the consciousness. The king doesn't have to live in that consciousness. He refers to the people who have that consciousness when he has a problem. Otherwise, he protects Dharma. It's a completely different concept of king. We have to understand these are very important differences without which you will not really appreciate Indian history or values and as they collide. You say, oh, they had kings, we had kings. No, the concept is totally different. So, I'm coming back to the governance structure. So, the Constitution of India is a replica. It has not worked. It has failed on three levels. First, it is the world's fattest constitution. Hodgepodge pieces thrown together, no integrity. So, big thing. And being like that, it has a second world record. It has the largest number of constitutional crises where pieces don't fit, they collide with each other, they contradict. So you have to go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, please interpret this to make it consistent. And by force, they impose a consistency. The joke of this is that a decade later, you can review the same question and impose a different consistency based on your current values. It does not work. This is what happened just a few weeks ago. I don't know if you're aware. The Supreme Court took a judgment of 1967, which was a constitutional judgment, and changed it completely and rejected that and gave a new interpretation. For what? So that the Aligarh Muslim University could now be declared a minority institution, even though it was created by the government. How perverse can the Supreme Court become? When it's not looking at national interest, it chooses to pander to political or other religious expediency. It is not living for Dharma. Although the quotation, the slogan for the Supreme Court is it Satyameva Jayate? In truth wins always. This, by the way, one of the Supreme Court judges wanted to remove. Because they don't want to follow the truth, right? They don't want victory of the truth. So this man actually came up saying, remove that Sanskrit. So this is all, well, that's why I'm pointing to all this, because we are undergoing a massive crisis. The moment there is an awakening of the deeper stirrings of the civilizational values, all that which has so far been happy to keep it suppressed now panics. The passage is not going to be easy. As long as you were asleep and the dominant groups were happy that you're asleep, everything was smooth and hunky-dory. You have a practical, superficial harmony. When the stirring takes place and something has to awaken which is new, which contradicts those who grip and suppress it, you will experience clash. This is unavoidable. The question is, between the two values, which is superior for the future of humanity, and not just for India, obviously for India first, but for humanity. Therein you will find your resolution. Otherwise, in the initial clash, remember, there will be a lot of confusion and conflict. There will be a lot of misrepresentation of the underlying truth of what's happening. And you will get swayed by the propaganda. Be very careful not to do that. Cut through to what is real behind. Make effort. If you don't, you will make the mistake. And today, the World Economic Forum has declared openly their view of humanity. We are hackable creatures. And if you're hackable creatures, you deserve to be hacked and controlled and manipulated by the elite who has the power to hack you. Right? And that's what the social media is about. China was very smart. They did not allow American social media ownership to enter China. They created their own so that their government could hack their people. What you have everywhere else in the world is the American military which can hack. And it's very sophisticated. You have no idea of how effective this is. They have already slotted you by your type and beliefs. In every detail, you're predictable. Just by observing what you watch and what you find interesting, what you like. That's why they want you to keep liking. You could have just ignored that whole like button. But they're making you reveal to them your thinking processes, your most intimate ideas and thoughts, so that they can map you totally. With that complete mapping, now they know exactly what are your weak points and your strong points and how they can manipulate you. You just gave yourself away and invited them into your deepest recesses of mind and heart. And invited them to hack you and manipulate you by what they throw at you. Okay, so this is the nature of the modern reality, which was never possible in the past. And in the subjective age, the degree of this hack is so powerful that you can create a riot in a space. That's why when you have riots, what do? First, they cut off the internet. They can create a riot, they can create peace. They could create a spiritual awakening if that was the intent of those. It is not their intent. Their intent is to keep you asleep. So these are tools. I'm not saying the tool is bad. I'm saying it's a tool. In whose hands and for what intention, that is important. They want you asleep. They want you sheep. Be conscious and make corrective moves against this. Do not get deceived by the manipulation. Recognize how easily you are manipulated. This is the hard part. You can't face it. You can't face that you're so easy to manipulate or even predict. But I'm coming back to governance structure. And that's why it's so important for India to recreate its own governance structure. So what happened with this constitution was they just copied all this. And I said, the first world record is the fattest. Second world record, the maximum constitutional crisis. Third world record, the largest number of amendments. Because you keep having to fix it. And still not done. Because it's still a subjective fix, a subjective bridging of pieces. When you have fragments, you can pretend to glue them, but the glue will always be there separating. It's not cohesive. Sri Aurobindo, having told you already that in 1910 you will pass through the experiment of parliamentary democracy. Next we would ask him, well, what's next? What would be the way for India? So, there's one more quote I had. He writes to someone, I don't know, in the 1920s. He says, the parliamentary system is doomed. It has brought Europe to its sorry pass. If you see in Europe, wherever the parliamentary system is there, you have these dysfunctional governments with so many, what do they call it, with nobody got a majority and they create coalition governments and nothing moves. And no development, obviously. If you had one king, at least something would move. Even if you were a despot, it would move in the direction of his despotism, but it would move at least. Here, nothing moves. Gridlock. That's certainly not the way. What does he say? He says, you have to understand again, that's why you have to go back to your traditional values, roots, which shape the civilizational values. He says the Indian people want to choose their king. So what would be more suitable for India would be a presidential model, where you pick the person that you trust, not the party. And he explains that, and he's quoting Napoleon, the parliamentary democracy has worked only in England, which is a nation of shopkeepers. That's the Napoleon quote. It's a small country. The mindset is different. Each little space can elect my representative. They all go to parliament. It's a small country, so the parliament is small. And they all talk and pretty much come to a resolution or not. That's the secondary issue. But when it's small enough and the mindset is common across, it's easy to manage. When you have a diverse and rich variation of mindset and a large country with massive variations in civilizational and cultural priorities, I don't say values, priorities, then you cannot have your representatives go and talk. First of all, the number of representatives directly elected by you going to parliament would make parliament 10,000 people. You can't have a conversation. It works in England because it's a small island. So then what happens? You elect a party, the party uses its whip, the party has its other agendas, and then all kinds of complications which you see. The net result is the thinking is misaligned with the machinery. So I say 1984, India voted for Rajiv Gandhi. Very simple. Why? Fresh face, young, not corrupted by like all other politicians. Even unwilling as it seemed. India voted for Rajiv Gandhi. How do you vote for him? You can't. Because the machinery requires you to vote for a local representative of his party. Who is the most corrupt guy? Who's been stealing from you all these years? You know him corrupt. And yet you willingly vote for someone known to be corrupt. Hoping that when they all go to parliament, they will elect for this incorrupted or non-corrupted person. That was the hope. Luckily they did. But he was not ready. He was not temperamentally capable of handling. He got swayed. That's a different story. But you see, the mechanism is not aligned to your thinking. You're voting for someone you trust by voting for somebody who you know is corrupt. Doesn't work. You understand? So you need to change the system. Otherwise, it will not work. You will continue to have the endemic corruption. You need a presidential system where you can vote for the man you trust directly. He comes to power not dependent on a party that he has to appease. He can choose his team, which need not be from people that have to be voted. Because people who can run elections and win elections are not necessarily good administrators. They are not truthful people. They tend to be corrupt. They need to be corrupt for that process. So you see the internal contradiction of a system and the demands of the system versus the demand of your mindset. And he should be able to choose his team irrespective, freely. Then you will have what you need. So again, look at 2014. India voted for Narendra Modi. What happens next? You voted for a local person, and I don't know, he's not necessarily the Narendra Modi. Okay, whatever he is, all the corrupt people, semi-corrupt, I don't know what, they go to parliament. In this case, they knew they didn't have a choice. They voted for him. We knew that would happen. But the people who got voted were not aligned to his thinking and gave him pushback, refusing him the changes which he wanted to make. The first 5 years were mostly wasted. Fighting bureaucracy, fighting your own party, fighting media. And the man you trusted could not change. What did he do? He was traveling all over the world, well, waking up people, but he could not make the changes internally. I know because I have friends who were inside business and inside even the government, and I would hear stories of how horrible it was. The entire bureaucracy pushed back. I remember, I can share this now openly because it doesn't matter, it's long back. I had to go for some work. It was in the education department. I went to the education ministry and it was a request for help for something. The Pondicherry University has a chair for Southeast Asian Christian studies. It does not have a chair for Sri Aurobindo studies. It's Pondicherry University. So I went to the then minister and I said, you know what, it's not for me. I'm asking, please put that, institute that, just release the funds and Put the right person. What happens all over the place, you have a chair for Indian studies, which is run by a Christian or a leftist. And they do everything possible to pervert the learning itself. They choose the right person. Even gave some certain suggestions of names, left it at that. So the person was boasting, that time Modi had just come to power, so they were boasting, oh, I've cleared so many files, I'm clearing so many files every day. They were trying to imitate Modi's pattern. And then suddenly after 10 minutes, the person said, okay, it's done, it's cleared. You'll have your results within 1 month, funds are released, it will be done. I said, wow, this is the new government, wonderful. They come back, nothing at all. Next time we call up the office, they don't take the call, they cut us off. I said, okay, I did my part, my work is done. As it turned out, some 5, 6, 7 years later, I don't know exactly when, an order came, start a Sri Aurobindo chair. And then it got into the politics. I don't know who's taken up. I don't really know what is happening. So I don't know. I will not say anything. But very likely, you would not have the people who are really deeply rooted in Sri Aurobindo's teaching, because there are many interests, many wheels within wheels. But I'm just showing how the machinery works, that in the party itself, you are controlled by the party interests, not by national interest. So that's why I quoted from the mother saying the parties belong to the past. The governance structure needed for India is a presidential system, and Sri Aurobindo particularly pointed to the French modification of the presidential system as better suited for India. But then what about the rest of the governance? He says, the exact detail is not important, but the top, the presidential, at the bottom, at the grassroots, the Panchayat framework. Now, the village Panchayat is where the villagers come together, interact with their trustworthy elders. And if you don't trust someone, you say, oh, sorry, we don't trust you. You pick people you trust. And they have to prove their trust and live up to the trust. Otherwise, they get eliminated. So it's very accessible. You come together, solve your problem immediately. You don't have to go to courts for years on end to get permission for something which is no more relevant. So Panchayat framework at the grassroots and some mechanism to bridge the two in between. I'm paraphrasing, but this. He says the exact mechanism is not important as long as it is the result of the Indic way of thinking and genius inherently. And these things can be modified. You're not bound to a fake constitution that you have to live up to. This was a major problem. In 1998, I think, the then President of India, who was obviously not rooted in the traditions of the civilization, he was even hostile to it, made a statement. We have to ask ourselves whether the constitution should serve us or we have to follow the constitution, or we have to live up to the constitution. This was the point. There was some talk at that point about correction in the constitution. He said we have to ask whether we are living up to the constitution. And the obvious answer to that is no, that's not what the constitution is for. If the constitution says you must walk on your head, that's not making it necessary for you to walk on your head. Rather, the constitution should be a reflection of your aspirations and civilizational values. Then you can say, yes, this is what we agree to live by. But if it is contrary and you are then asked to change your values because it is contrary, that's a perversion. And so I'm saying this very bluntly, the constitution is wrong. It does not suit the Indian civilizational values. It is wrongly structured. It does not align to our way of thinking. Therefore, it compels corruption all through the system. And because the system I already spoke of in the beginning was inherited from the British without change, the exploitation continues. And we have the mechanism, the way forward. Sri Aurobindo also points to the framework of governance which was created under Chandragupta Maurya, which he says was sophisticated enough that it could be applied as it is today with very minor corrections. And had it survived, it would have been competing with the best of the systems of governance today in the world. Had it survived. Unfortunately, that was lost. But the point is, one can create afresh, isn't it? So recently there was change in the law, criminal laws. A new framework has been created. It's good. But it does not go deep enough. It's not radical enough to rethink from scratch. It just changes these rules by another set of rules within a framework which is still alien. Isn't it? This whole concept If you commit a crime, you will go to jail. What they have changed is only how you go to jail, how long, what kind of punishment. That concept itself is not fitting the Indian model. And what's a good example of the Indian model? You go to the story in the Mahabharata, where Vidura is the great wise man, and the others as the king's advisors were jealous of him. So, as it happens, 4 people have been arrested for committing a murder. They're brought to the king, and so the king decides to teach a lesson to the other wise people. He says, give me your advice. So all of them give different kinds of advice. That's the punishment. Then at the end, he says, now I turn to Vidura. What is your advice? Vidura is the wise, and he wants to show how he is more wise than others. So Vidura says, I cannot say anything until I question these 4. Others say, no, but we know the crime. There's no doubt the crime was committed by all 4 equally. But still I have to talk to them. Okay? He asked the people, what is your temperament? The first says, I'm a seeker of knowledge, Brahmana. The second says, I'm a warrior, I'm a Kshatriya. The second says, I'm a Vaishya, trader. The fourth says, I'm a craftsman, Shudra. Now, having heard this, Vidura passes judgment. The first one, seeker of knowledge, he has the death sentence. Because knowing full well, he did what was wrong. He doesn't deserve to live. The second, who was a warrior, he committed a crime of passion. So he must learn to restrain his passion, so he will be jailed for 1 year. The third was a merchant. He did this for the benefit or profit. So as a consequence, the profits he has earned are immoral. So all his wealth is taken away by the state, but he is free to rebuild his business from scratch. The fourth, he was misled by the others. He didn't have discrimination, so he's given a warning and freed. What a different model of justice. Think about it. It really makes you think, it turns your world upside down. The Western model of justice who is blind, she doesn't care who is in front of you. You committed this crime, this is your punishment. In a code, so different. It's not blind justice. What is the purpose of the justice? Come back to the big picture. You want people to grow in consciousness. That's what we are here for. We are all conscious beings in evolution. Come back to that recognition. What do you do now to help you grow? You made a mistake. The punishment, if that's the word we will use, should be such that it will help you grow conscious so that you do not repeat the same mistake. By growth of consciousness, not merely fear. Because otherwise it changes nothing in consciousness. And for which you have to look at the temperament of the person, the motives for which he committed, and then adjust the nature of the interaction that follows. Isn't it? If somebody is unable to restrain and control himself, then the nature of the consequence would be that you would teach him there is self-restraint, and so on. So we have a completely different framework around which this constitution, if we need one, has to be built, or the systems of governance or even of crime management and so on have to be built. Obviously, we will draw from what exists, but not by replicating it, but by rethinking from scratch. Do we have people who are already thinking along these lines? Certainly in the governance, I don't see anybody. Maybe there are, I don't know. Certainly in political discourse, in national discourse, nowhere these thoughts are coming in. And so what we're doing now is basically seeding those ideas, and that's the work that Brhat is doing. I want to widen this to other aspects of national life. In education, there was already a very important and helpful presentation, but I want to question that again from scratch. What is education for? And what's the difference in approach in our model of education? In the Western model, as it survives, with some improvements more recently, because there is not this idea of a spiritual evolution, even in the Abrahamic traditions of which largely the West is dominated. You live your life, you follow the laws, you will get rewarded in heaven. So your earthly life is a temporary passage to get your ticket to heaven, no other purpose. You do not see that there is an evolution going across lives. So the education itself is just so that you can be morally and ethically sound minimally, do your bit, and when it was under the church oppression, you serve the church and get your ticket. That's about it. When the church and God and spirituality, whatever content of it was thrown out, then you had this very hard materialistic turn where the child is just a product of their genetics and therefore malleable, raw material to be shaped, to be beaten in shape if needed. And that was actually the model openly spoken of. Carrot and stick model, give reward, give punishment, and by combination you will shape the child to become whatever it is. And to fit into a society which is itself a gigantic machine, because again, no soul, no God, what's left is machinery. So you create design pieces to fit the machinery. I need so many lawyers for the future. I need so many doctors for the future. Produce doctors. And the implicit suggestion is if you train a person shape enough, you can make a good doctor. Now, this is completely contrary to the Indian concept. First of all, you are a soul in evolution across lives. You already have a path distinctly unique to yours. You have taken birth in a context which is nourishing or helpful for your soul with a temperament that it has chosen aligned to its soul aspiration for this life experience. So Swabhava, your temperament, points to your Swadharma, your innate truth of being that you will fulfill, which is aligned to the soul's true Swadharma, which is spiritual. If this be the case, every child being unique, you cannot beat him into shape, you cannot force him. It is a coarse, crude, barbaric violence to force children into modes which are contrary to their soul aspiration. On the other hand, if you start observing there is a soul aspiration, you can leverage that soul's aspiration to intensify and use that as a lever to fully develop what is a blooming flower. As it blooms, I can assist to widen and make more rich by opening to things which are outside the immediate scope of interest by connecting them. And thus allow the child to fully flower into what he will be, which is distinct and unique across every child. So naturally, this kind of a common curriculum imposed on all is no more relevant. The beating into shape is no more relevant. Reward and punishment as prime drivers are perverse. So how will that system of education be? This is a broad framework. Sri Aurobindo goes to the psychology of learning and growth. And you heard the three principles, but there's much more to it. And he's created a whole framework very close to the Montessori system, incidentally. Maria Montessori, when she was writing her articles, Sri Aurobindo was writing in India, she was writing a year or two later, quite independently, but she had as if caught all those things. She also coming, although from the Christian tradition, was a mystic. So she speaks of the cosmic purpose of the soul. And from there she aligns to these ideas. And later her best writings are in the last, 7 years or so, where she was in Adyar, in Chennai. Sri Aurobindo was here in Pondicherry. And she had read Sri Aurobindo's writings. That's when she has her most wonderful works. And one of her books she dedicated to Sri Aurobindo, wrote it to Sri Aurobindo with gratitude and sent that book to the ashram. I believe when the ashram school was opened, she visited Pondicherry and gave a message to the children of the ashram school saying, here is a spiritual opportunity for you, make the most of it. She was fully aligned to that line of thinking. But I'm showing you that the framework of education needs to be rethought. This whole business of sitting in a classroom and learning by rote is pointless. If passing exam to get a piece of paper is your goal, then to be able to cheat to get your paper is your shortest way, isn't it? So in Bangladesh, they had riots because the government prevented them from cheating. It's true, I'm not joking. But the thinking is reduced to just that much, isn't it? And the employer then, what does he do? The paper is useless. I get 1,000 people who have 96% marks. I'm not interested in your marks. I want to know if I can trust you. Are you creative? Are you a good team member? Can you work independently? Can I assign a work to you and trust that you will get back with the results? Nothing of that is there in the education. So what do? You have an interview. Where in the interview, I'm trying to assess your creativity and your trustworthiness. So why is the paper important? As a first filter. Because I cannot interview 1,000 people. I will eliminate everybody below the 96% mark, pass mark, and get the last 20 people whom I will interview. Hoping that the good ones are there. When I might have thrown away the good ones who were 95% or 95.5 or 95.9. That happens. You get thrown out because of the 0.1. And that might have been the most creative and trustworthy who just got thrown out. And maybe the 91% might have been even superior because he's so creative that he gets bored with this rote learning and he's not good at it. And he might have been the Steve Jobs who makes the breakthrough that is required. You see? So the system is perverse on every level. To the child, dehumanizing. In the Marx system, again, dehumanizing. To the employer, useless. Who is it serving? And this is a very painful question when you put it in these terms. And I've said this even to many schools, and it's hard it's too radical, not for the school, for the parents. Where I say that, okay, I'll give an example. There's a girl who comes and she's no time. I said, do some exercise, you're growing. No time. Why? All day studies. What do? Morning I go to school. After school I go to tuitions. After this tuition I go to another tuition which is a different part of the city in Calcutta. And the parents are anxious. So I asked the girl, do you need those tuitions? She said, no, I think I can manage. So I look at the mother. Yes, but just in case, I don't want her to lose out something which others are getting but she might not get. For the pass marks. What a punishment, torture to the children and crushing of the mind. Sri Aurobindo says mind is the most delicate organ. And you're crushing it. They get numb. And emotionally, they get numb. They commit suicide. 2,000 children in India every year commit suicide at the time of exams. This is statistics from 15 years ago. Numbers have increased. The best students in IIT with the highest marks who have got in with those high marks, you have high rates of committing suicide in the IITs. And even in the US, in some of the MITs and others. Why? Something is wrong in the system, isn't it? Kota, which is the focal point for tuition training, has the highest number of suicides in the country today. Something is seriously wrong. Coming back to this, if you come back to the soul as your reference and you rebuild from there the entire education, one big difference. See, the problem of modern people and the modern education is you are taught to become a hypocrite. You're told what you should be doing, but you don't feel the truth of it, so you pretend. And this is the big difference when you go to the villages where they are not formally educated, and the ones who are especially English educated, you look in their eyes. The villagers, simple, you can read their mind, you can read their feelings. The educated, they're lying. You can see that you can't see what is inside. They're putting a defense on an appearance. It's fake. You've been taught to become fake. The problem with that is you've been taught to disconnect from your soul. So where the civilization aims at the soul's emergence as the driver of life, impulses and choices, you've been taught to block that and cover it and lose it completely, disconnecting from it. So you become sociopathic. That's the reason why you find some of the most brilliant high IQ people having sociopathic tendencies. This disconnect from the soul. Now go back to an education where from childhood you would put the soul and its aspirations and its sensitivities in the center. As the layers of your personality form, you will align them to the center and its values. Instead of creating layers which block the soul's light, you would create layers which would be skillful as anyone else, maybe more skillful because infused with the soul's light. And the child now comes into full adulthood, full individuality with this continuity from soul to thought to action, with precision, with perfection, with skill, power, etc. The problem of today's education, the smartest people, the most skillful people are also the most perverse, the most willing to compromise because they've been cut off. The less skillful are the ones who are better aligned. This would be reversed if the educational system itself did it this way. And all this needs to be done. The very first step, let's start talking about it and put into practice in our spaces what we can. So there are many more things one could say, but I think broadly I have tried to cover the major lines of civilizational context of the big picture of the history and underlying spiritual innate values, as well as the modern structures and the particular conflicts which came through the freedom struggle and post-freedom and are still unfinished freedom struggle, which I've mentioned at the beginning. So this is the big picture I want to place before you. You have also insights on governance, on education, and a few other things. So I'll pause here and invite your questions. How much time do we have?
When you pass it.
Yes.
It's okay, that's all right.
Okay, so you take a call when we stop.
We'll take a few questions. Everybody is a little.
Yes. And that's fine. You don't have to have questions right now. Just soak in the ideas. Yes.
What you said about the educational system really resonates with me. I was educated in the UK and for 5 years in school. And I always felt like there was a great disconnect between what we're learning in the classroom and otherwise, But at the same time, like, I'm just wondering, to people who are in that system, or whether it's in India or elsewhere, is it inevitable that you're going to be mentally conditioned by that, or can you escape that? Because
Yes, it's an important question. Is it inevitable that we will be conditioned by the education system, or can we escape that? Yes, you can. Two things could help you. One, your own soul's strong influence, which as you felt, it's not what I want. It's contrary to my values. So either you protect that and survive the system and come through and rebuild once you get free of it, which many people did. And many hippies were idealistic and then they fell into drugs thinking that's the freedom. Unfortunately, because they were told that is spiritual, so they went off track totally. But if you held your idealism and built your life around it, you could survive it. That would be one way, but you would still be lost. You would still be struggling against a society which thinks this is unhealthy and that is healthy. Okay? But that's the problem. The other help you could get is from your immediate surroundings. I would say parents, but sometimes it could be a society. It could be one person in your life who may or may not be a relative, who would, as if, rekindle your flame and teach you to trust it. And you would then follow your own soul's influence. I'm not saying you have to know your soul, just feel its influence, follow that, and you would still have got through and survived. Sometimes it's just remembering someone, my grandmother, maybe I met her for 20 years, first 5 years of my life. Now she's gone, but I remember, and that's my reference, and that helps. Sometimes something which comes from the religious tradition also could serve such a reference. But it's not inevitable.
Thank you, sir. It was lovely 3 hours, and I think I'll have more questions after a night of rumination on these. When we talked about India's model of governance and how the parliamentary system might not be the best, so we looked at, okay, perhaps the presidential one is a better mimic of our old king system. But also in our king system, we also, as you mentioned, he was subservient to Dharma, he has to serve Dharma. There was also always a Mahapurohit, a Maharishi, who actually ensures this sanctity. And you mentioned how people might have options to kind of, go against the king if need be. They would go it via the Maharishi. And going now into creative virgin territory, can we think of a system where there is not just a president, but we elect two people, the executive leader, but the spiritual bone as well?
Yes, so it's an interesting idea, but obviously you can see that it will have a lot of complications, because what the popular mind thinks is spiritual need not be. Otherwise, you would not have so many confusing movements. What is needed though, if the person we elected we trust fully and the person is sincere, he will find the spiritual references that he finds trustworthy or helpful and we leave it to that. And if he is genuine, if he is sincere, he will find the right people. And they may not always be obviously spiritual. That doesn't matter anymore. But what they had also in the past was they had a method of representation where every interest group could be represented around the king, and you did not have to go through the artificial methods right now. As what happens today, for example, you have a representative of a particular group and the representative is bought out. So you are trapped. You elected them, you can do nothing because he will not represent your interest. He will represent some other interests which serve him and so on. So all that could be bypassed simply by going directly to that space and sorting it out. So we had a working method. The details are not important, as if we rebuild around the central idea around it, and that's possible to do, is not difficult at all. Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, your lecture is very, very wide. It took touched so many aspects of civilization, humanity, and development, self-development also. So about self-development, I want to ask you, what do you think is a successful person? I mean, what is a success? Because success is such a very often used word in English-speaking people, and but also in Europe, in Western countries. So success. What is successful for you, and what's the meaning of successful? What is a successful process in somehow which is fulfilling the purpose?
Yes, it's an important question. Our educational system has programmed us with a certain definition or idea of the word success. Remember, as a student, when we were completing school, there was one boy who said, "I know my life goal." We said, "What?" "It is to be successful." Okay, life's goal. So I said, "What do you mean?" "Successful." "And what do you mean by that?" "Successful." He couldn't go beyond the word. So I said, "Famous, rich." "Yeah, that also, but successful." So the problem is, this is an undefined word. But implicit to the educational content and the media, particularly through cinema as well as through advertisement, the concept of success has been associated with a lot of wealth, a lot of power and fame. And the problem is, you could pick someone like Osama bin Laden, lot of wealth, lot of power, lot of fame. Is that success for you? Probably not. So notoriety could also be mixed with this. So there's something you're missing. You say, no, not that kind of success, but some other. If you start introspecting really, and really you have to go into deep introspection, what is it you're looking for with a lot of wealth? When you're wealthy, what is it that you can do? You can do what you want, or so you think. Look at the wealthy people, they're often trapped by their wealth and the fear of losing their wealth. It's not quite a true freedom. What is it that you seek through fame? Not fame is not giving you freedom. Fame is giving you attention of people. What is attention giving you? What are you seeking through attention? Affection, acceptance, love. But if that affection, acceptance is conditional, as long as you perform like Amitabh Bachchan, I will respect you. No, you have to like me for what I am. Right? So you want unconditional love, which you hope to get through fame. It takes it away. At the end of the day, by becoming famous, you're bound to the framework in which you got fame. This fellow is behaving off the screen, he is behaving totally different. This is not the man that I like, right? So I was in a group where there was this question. There was a Bollywood actress who came out with a violent statement against Hindu traditions. And so when I posted that, somebody said, "Oh, what a pity. I used to like her so much." What did you like her? You didn't even know her. You liked the roles she played, which was just a pretense. Here you met the real person. She has hatred. And you don't like that. So where is this affection that you're getting as long as you're playing a role? Do you know why so many actors have severe depression? Why so many who are in the film industry or models commit suicide? They're living in this false appearance. They have to play to gain that affection. They step out of it in their normal life. They don't have it. They know that what they're living is not worthy of that affection, that conflict. So what you're looking for through fame is this unconditional love. Can you get it more directly? You will have the satisfaction of the fame. If you're getting the freedom that you'll have the satisfaction of what you thought you will get by wealth or power and so on. So if you go really deep into this idea of success, and what you're looking for, you will come to something where you're able to follow that thing which gives you the most deep satisfaction, and you're able to take it to your greatest fulfillment in your growth and evolution. That's what it comes to finally. If you have that, you will feel successful. If you don't have that, others may say you have success, you will be miserable and might, as those actresses, commit suicide because you're so unhappy, so miserable with the fake thing you're doing. So Sri Krishna makes this very interesting observation in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, it is better that you have failed in following your line of development than if you become successful in imitating somebody else's line of development, which is fake. So, I will now redefine success in my words. I will say success is fulfilling the purpose for which you took birth. Your soul took birth. You follow that, fulfill that thing for which you came to do. You will look back at your life, you will say, wow, I did it. I completed this. And you look forward to the next step that you will do in your development. Ultimately, it will be this. The problem is I'm not fully aligned with my soul. I'm mixed with so many other desires and imprints created by various media or education. And I'm trying to fit those into my soul aspiration. So I end up with a kind of a compromise. Still, and I'm saying you don't need to deny yourself those things. Please, if you need fame, have your fame. Get done with it. Realize how insufficient it is to give you satisfaction and then move on with the thing which is deeper for you. So certainly we all need a minimum level of wealth for us to be comfortable enough that we don't have to worry for our survival so that we can do what we want to do. Get to that. But while getting to that, focus on the thing which gives you deepest satisfaction. Don't stop with that which for you right now is satisfying. Keep in mind as you reach there, it will widen, it will change, it will become more rich, more complex, more complete. That's how you will have your most complete and fulfilling growth of consciousness, which will be the success and your soul's evolution. That's your reference, growth. Yes.
Thank you for amazing words of wisdom. So I'm going back to the education. Right? Now the model of education, the way you explained, requires the process to connect to the true self and then develop from there. So two-part question. One is, this is enormous amount of customization, and given the scale that we are talking about, is it practical? Number two, a lot of intelligence that we thought belonged to human is now artificial, can be done much more effectively through artificial growth. So where is the role of individual development, right? And what is the going forward, where do we see ourselves as educators?
Very important questions. And I will give a few examples also, but on a practical level. First, is it feasible that you have a customized education for each one? So first, it's not necessary for every child to know their self. It's enough that they feel the alignment of their temperament, which gives deeper satisfaction. That's enough. For the teacher, similarly, it's not necessary they know their self, but they're broadly aligned to that deeper sensitivity of this influence of their soul within, which automatically takes care of morality, ethics, and other issues, because you feel what's right, you feel what's not right. That sensitivity is all that's enough. Even a mother who feels the sensitivity for what her child needs, that sensitivity is more than enough. Okay, so it's not a big deal. We have all the necessary things. Coming into the classroom, what do you do to customize? And take the model of the Montessori system, where you have a mix of many age groups and activity-based. A rich spread of possible activities. Watch what the child is drawn to. Watch what the child does. And let there be peer learning. They teach each other, they help each other. So you're developing individuality, you're developing teamwork, all the things which you would never learn in your mechanical industrial classroom. And you can grow all the way through education in such a model without difficulty. The skill of the teacher will be to watch you, where necessary, widen the scope of what you're experimenting with. Hey, by the way, turn this, widen that, or help you when you're blocked if needed, or let others help you even. So actually, number of teachers needed is very few. They certainly need to be more sensitive and not mechanical taskmasters, which you could easily replace by a robot. So that's the AI model of education. You'll replace teacher by AI. But I'm showing something else. We need the human touch. We need the deep empathy that comes with the human touch. And ideally, we would want a society which is already so empathic that anybody could be picked up from society and would be a reasonably good teacher for a certain age group. As you move into domain of specialized knowledge, there the handover to specialized processes for learning also could be done. Again, up to a point. So there my model suggested would be, already you see this, children are learning more from cinema and more from social media than anything you could in a classroom. Mostly they waste their time in classroom, sitting, listening to lectures which are boring, where you understand nothing or you already know. Either way, it's useless, time wasted. I will give you lots of social, I won't say social media, but I'll say video-based learning kits. Okay, I'll take the best presentations like you see in high-quality documentaries on various topics. I'll give you the best which you watch at your pace. So my university education would be first many rooms with your multimedia facility, with your headphone, you watch your thing at your pace. Review, think about it, raise questions, find answers by searching the internet, whatever. Having done that for the bulk of your time, you will now come to the classroom and sit with me, and now we will discuss what you have learned and turn it to complex application. So my specialization, my capacity to lead you into interesting domains is fully used. Otherwise, as a teacher, I'm wasting my time repeating every year the same old thing which I've said exactly the same way 10 years ago. What's my creativity and capacity? 200 people listening, I can't even have meaningful interaction, and they have not even got it because they need it at a different pace. I'm going too fast or too slow. It's a waste of time for everyone. So learn at your pace with the best multimedia which didn't exist before. That's your teachers, including my recording of last year's, if that's good enough. Please watch that. Now come into the class. Let's discuss and let's apply. Here I will form teams, take up projects, execute these with variations of what interests you in the way it interests you, and then take that through, and I'll be there to guide you. That would be high quality education. Okay? So all the way from bottom to up, it needs less money, less time, less numbers of teachers, but with much more useful content development, growth, self-confidence, and all the other skills which would come with teamwork. Doable right now. You do not need anything else. It will cost less. Okay, so I'm showing you there are practical solutions. It's not something abstract that we're talking about. It's already rooted within you. And I'm not even saying your civilization. In you, deep inside you, you know what is needed. The problem is you've looked outside you for too long and imitated others. It was a necessary phase. Remember Sri Aurobindo's comment? Pass through the experiment of parliamentary democracy simply to realize it is not suited for us. You've done not only that, you've followed the Western model of education, Western model of religion, you've followed other models of governance. You've done everything to realize this does not work. And maybe it was useful, however much it may be painful and a loss of time. But at a civilizational level now, it demands that you question what will be your way of doing. What do you need? What do your children need? What does the country need? What does humanity need? And find the answer by introspection, self-observation, for which use the means external available to you. But don't believe them just because they say it. Just because the head of a famous tradition says this is how it is. Yeah, maybe provisionally. Does it fit? Does it align? Does it logically fit with all the rest that I know? And maybe you will question. Even religious and spiritual heads, you will question. And I would say that is good. Because when you find your answer, you'll find in the spiritual consciousness, because that is one with the self, all possibilities are justified. All experiences are an aspect of the self. And therefore, everything can be seen, yes, there's a truth to that. But that's not my line. That's not the complete truth. That's not for us today in the current context of our evolution relevant. What is? Find that, work, take small steps in that direction. If you're in a position of authority, express that, organize your workspace around these values. And you'll be already setting in place a framework which will be more effective, more inspiring, and with high results in terms of outcome. If you're in a space where you're a participant, you don't have the choice to make that change, and yet you make the change in the way you deal with people and the way you interact with the team. Assert the deeper truth of your being in your circumstances and begin to make that change. And this is how the new golden age, the new Satya Yuga will form, when each individual from within discovers, it's just covered, it's all there. Discover and reveal what is already within you more and more directly, more and more completely. And with that, there is the awakening of humanity entering through the subjective age into the spiritual age, which is imminent. Do not get deceived by the appearances of conflict and crisis. I explained why it is inevitable. But stand firm, hold to this deep conviction and persist. And the victory of the divine truth of Dharma is inevitable because that is the underlying reality. All that is not real is inevitably going to break down and fade out. Cling to the truth, cling to your dharma, cling to your deepest soul aspiration, and let your life more and more be organized around it. Your thoughts, emotions, actions, refer to that again and again. Spend some time every day, even if it is for 5 minutes, where you become very quiet. Quiet your mind, quiet your emotions, still your body, and feel deep within you that part where you feel spontaneously the love for the divine, the aspiration for perfection, for beauty, for truth, for the real, and especially this love that flows for God, for the Divine Mother, for the Shakti, whichever way it expresses in you. Feel that, immerse in that, flow with that, and let that influence fill you more and more, filling your thoughts, filling your emotions, and let it lead your actions. This is the easiest and most rapid way by which you will align with the spiritual presence which is already within you and allow it to lead your life. And that will be the beginning of spontaneous, effortless spiritual life. But live the life, take this influence all the way into all activities. Nothing is to be neglected. All is to be taken up. It is not a world of illusion. It is a world of divine Sachidananda to be perfected, the divinity to be revealed, and your life to be consecrated to that awakening of the divinity in all. The three words, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, the truth, the sacred, the beautiful, in its most essential sense, is what you fill into your life. That will be the spiritualization of the collective of humanity, of India and the world. It's not difficult. It just requires you to prioritize the inner and let it lead you. Let's hold ourselves in this aspiration. Concentrate in this, that this should be the beginning for you of a new phase in your life dedicated to this awakening. Namaste. Shall we end with a chant of Om 3 times, just as a conclusion? Om.